Let's turn to some politics now. In the face of growing criticism, Donald Trump remains ahead in the Republican race for president.
According to a national CBS News New York Times poll out today, the billionaire has a commanding lead, coming in at 35%. Now, most of the interviews for this poll were conducted before Trump made those statements about banning Muslims into the United States.
Ted Cruz is next at 16%. Ben Carson, who held the lead in our last poll, has dropped to third place with 13%.
And this comes as Trump is again hinting he might run for president as a third-party candidate, all while continuing to defend his proposed ban on Muslims entering the U.S.
CBS News senior political editor Steve Chaggaris is here with us now from Washington. Steve, thanks for being here. So let me ask you, how significant is Trump's lead in this poll?
Well, it's the highest level of support he's gotten in a CBS News poll to date. So there's that. He's leading among many demographics and many slices of the Republican Party. There are a couple caveats. It's a national poll, and these things can change once voting starts in some of the early states. And also, you mentioned this was before the Muslim ban proposal, but there's not much evidence to show that Muslim ban is going to really have much of an effect on his numbers.
So what are Republican leaders more nervous about here, Steve? Is it Trump's bombastic rhetoric, or is it this possible third-party run?
I mean, it's definitely both. The rhetoric is something that I think has worried leaders for years, or at least in recent years. They've encouraged candidates to be less bombastic so they can set themselves up for a general election and speaking to others besides Republicans in a primary. But also the third-party threat is something that they're very concerned about. They look back at what happened in 1992 when Ross Perot ran, and the thinking was that he took a lot of votes away from George H.W. Bush and allowed Bill Clinton to be elected. And so they don't want to see that kind of scenario happen again, handing this over to Hillary Clinton.
Steve, a lot of Trump voters continue to be very firm in their support. 51% of his backers say their minds are made up about him, compared to just a quarter of voters who support a candidate other than Mr. Trump. But the question, I guess, and this comes down to math, right? I mean, the fact that he's doing so well, these are amongst Republican voters. In a head-to-head with the Democratic nominee, does he have a real shot at winning the presidency?
I mean, we'll see. You know, it's interesting. This poll also showed among independents there's not a lot of excitement or optimism for a Donald Trump presidency. But you look at Hillary Clinton's numbers, if she's the nominee for the Democrats, she's not that much better. And so I think it remains to be seen, among independents at least, who they would support. They're not very excited about either candidate at this point.
So what's the solution here for those ultra-Republicans who have not really come out and said that they disagree with Mr. Trump's plan about banning Muslims into the United States? They haven't really said, yes, I agree with it, or no, I don't agree with it. They're kind of walking that fine line, it seems. How does the party solve this without alienating Mr. Trump?
There aren't a ton of options for the party at this point. As you mentioned, there's the thinking that if you go after him directly, it's only going to really boost his support. And we've seen that over the summer and into the fall. Any candidate that's really gone after him hard has not done very well. And so you've got a few candidates still doing that. Then you have, the fear of him bolting the party and running against the party. So the options are, let the process play out. We're still 50 some odd days from Iowa and 61 days from New Hampshire. There's still a lot of time for this to work out. You think that the establishment would figure out in the next couple of months an establishment type, or at least establishment friendly figure to coalesce behind and be the person to maybe go up against Trump in the early primaries. Right now you have 14 candidates running in the Republican primary. And so maybe they coalesce behind a Jeb Bush or a Marco Rubio or a Chris Christie or a John Kasich, somebody that the establishment is that they're comfortable with, that wouldn't necessarily go after Donald Trump directly, but just sort of say, here's another road the Republican Party can go down, and this would be a much more palatable nominee for the party in a general election.
And a lot of people, Steve, are saying that more palatable candidate could be Ted Cruz. And it's interesting, you've got a lot of these candidates that are coming right out and criticizing Mr. Trump. Some of them very harsh, like Lindsey Graham. Others not so harsh, like Ted Cruz. And people saying, well, this is because he wants to eventually, if Mr. Trump doesn't make it to the to get the nominee, that he's going to get all those evangelical voters, those frustrated, angry voters that want sort of a non-traditional candidate. But it's also kind of weird, and everything about this election is turning out to be bizarre compared to the others. But you have candidates that are saying, you know, I would support Donald Trump if he is the eventual Republican nominee, but I completely disagree with his plan for banning all Muslims. And it seems to be they're saying that because they're saying, like Jeb Bush did, which is, well, you know, I'm saying I'm going to support the eventual candidate because it's not going to be him.
Well, there's that. They all think it's going to be themselves. Again, you're not running for president to boost somebody else. You're running for president because you think you have a chance of becoming the nominee. Ultimately, though, I mean, there'll be shades of support, right? So if Donald Trump becomes the nominee, you'll have some of these candidates who'll be out there campaigning for him and rah-rah for Donald Trump. And I think you'll have others who just will keep their mouths shut. They're not going to run against him, and they're not going to say negative things about the ultimate Republican nominee. It's not good for the party. They may not be out there supporting him and going to Donald Trump rallies if he's the nominee, but at the same time, you know, they're not going to go out there and trash him either once he becomes the nominee if that happens.
Steve Chaggaris in Washington. Always a pleasure, Steve. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks.